Hello, Peppers. Here's a surprise. Well, maybe not a surprise for those who are following us on our Twitter feed, which is Pep, at Pep, Chaz, Dr. Dave, at PEPCHASDRDAVE. Why did I make it so complicated? I'm Chaz the Show, this is Pep, and this is not Dr. Dave. This is our special guest podcaster, Felicity Ruby. Hello, Felicity.
Hello.
Do I call you Felicity or Flick?
Flick is fine.
Flick, because I call you Flick in real life, so that's good. Okay, so Flick, now, first of all, we always start off when we have a guest podcaster explaining why the guest podcaster is here. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do?
I am a PhD candidate at Sydney University,
Yes.
and I'm a friend of Julian Assange's. I used to work for Senator Scott Ludlam, and during 2010, when things started to get pretty nasty, we noticed something pretty serious happening to an Australian citizen, but we mostly noticed the implications for press freedom. So with those two things in mind, an Australian citizen and press freedom, the implications, we started to do work to highlight the issues and ended up going over to London and meeting him, and we became friends. And so I've followed it pretty closely since, and now WikiLeaks and Bernard Collaery's case and some protesters at Pine Gap are my three case studies for my PhD, which is about intelligence and democracy.
I was about to say, we're going to obviously start with Julian Assange because you know the guy, but on top of that, you're kind of, you know your shit when it comes to all things surveillance and security and that kind of stuff. So we're going to go through a few of those kinds of topics as we go through, with a few little topical diversions as we go, because it's that kind of stuff is always in the news in America. But let's start for the first bit of this podcast, at the very least, by talking about Julian Assange. I spoke about him for 5 seconds on last Friday's show. I then spoke about him for more like 15 minutes on the podcast. I have only just read bits and pieces about the trial, so I thought it'd be a very good idea to get someone who actually knew what was going on to talk about that. So let's start by talking about that. First of all, let me just ask you a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
Did they actually stream the trial online?
No.
So how do you know about it?
So the way I followed this trial, this really important trial, for 4 weeks, from 7 at night till 3 in the morning every day, was through the Twitter stream of 5 journalists who had been given access to a video stream. So at a certain point, 40 NGOs and parliamentarians and court reporters were given access, in addition to some journalists. Those 40 had their access removed the morning that the trial started. So that meant that Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and a bunch of pretty authoritative, gravitas-laden organisations couldn't follow this very important trial. But the handful of journalists that had applied for and received accreditation could witness a pretty patchy, technically unsophisticated feed, which was a bit better than some of the administrative hearings, which were in some of those 1980s telephone conference software where each and every person who had joined and left the conference was announced. I don't know if you remember those. Yes. It was just an atrocity exhibition of criminal imbecility. The the British justice system just couldn't get its technology together. Whereas here in New South Wales, I remember I was watching the stream of the Supreme Court ruling on a protest for Black Lives Matter. That was 2,000 of us were watching. Pretty simple that, here in the colonies we can just simply stream in the kind of spirit of open justice. However, in England, no, we don't have open justice. We have the open justice through Twitter. So
now, is that because the British courts are generally like that, or is that special for Julian Assange?
I think it's a combination of special for Julian Assange, COVID kind of problems. Yeah. And which you would think, like the rest of the world, that would enhance the use of technology and bring people up to a speed this isn't technically difficult. The UK is a Five Eyes country. They have the cutting edge, unlimited budgets, technical sophistication. They can take photos of white golf balls in white rooms from space. This is not a technical problem, but it was constantly a technical problem.
I'm led to I believe that London is the world capital for surveillance cameras. So you think they could put one in a court?
You'd think. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Before we get into the ins and outs of the actual court case, the one thing there are many things, but one thing that I can't get past is the Hannibal Lecter box. Right. Did we at any point in time find out why he was in a Hannibal Lecter box? What's the justification for that?
There is no justification for Julian being kept in this glass box at the back of the courtroom, both at Woolwich Court, which is the court that's adjacent to Belmarsh Prison, and also at the Old Bailey. You know, the images that you have of court settings are, even, serious murderers, O.J. Simpson, all these kind of high-profile cases, the defendant is able to instruct their lawyers. That's a basic part of justice processes, that you can confidentially speak with your lawyer. Not only can Julian not confidentially speak with his lawyers, he has to get on his knees and whisper through a slight break in the glass after waving so that the whole courtroom knows that he wants to speak to his lawyer.
So he waves, a lawyer comes over, puts his ear to the crack, and then Julian can whisper through the crack.
Right.
And is that, once again, is that a special Julian thing? Is that because he skipped bail? Is that? I mean, what is it? Is he Magneto? I don't understand. What's the reasoning that they what's the theory behind the glass box?
Even the prosecution said that they wouldn't object to him sitting with his lawyers. So even the Americans, who he's in a high maximum security jail at the behest of the Americans. He's being held because of this extradition, request on behalf of the Americans, and even they did not object to him sitting with his lawyers. But the judge said no, that's where he's going to stay.
Okay, and the judge never gave a reason.
No. And this is a non-violent, non-dangerous human being. This is a computer geek. This is a softly spoken, gentle man with a very large brain, and never any problem, a completely peaceful person. This is not a dangerous man.
No.
But
I suppose he has cats and his hair is prematurely white, so they might think he's a Bond villain. Maybe.
Yeah, it's just another sort of symbolic piece of the theatre. I mean, the other really vile part of the theatre that started this resumed session, because the case started in February, but it got delayed because of COVID. So this was a resumption of a hearing that started in February. But at the start of this one, he was rearrested down in the cells, or up in the cells, wherever it is in the Old Bailey. Why? Because well after all the deadlines for submissions of documents, and well after the defence had submitted all of their arguments and all of their evidence, the Americans issued a new indictment with new material, not new charges, but new material, introducing stuff about Snowden, introducing stuff about this guy called Siggy, introducing some stuff about Anonymous. So all kinds of new tracts of material, not to do with 2010, which is what all of the last indictments were to do with. So there was this strange theatre where Julian had to be rearrested on the new indictment, which he hadn't seen, and which his defence team hadn't been able to consult with him on or take instructions. So there's these symbolic kind of seeming theatres, that have very strong material effect to do with obstructing his right to a fair trial.
At the very least, it's easy to find him, to arrest him. You just go, it's the guy in the glass box. He can't get very far. So that's good news for them.
And he's been in their custody, to get to the court. By the time the court began at 10 o'clock in the morning, he's been up at since 5, but going through all kinds of horrendous kind of security protocols and processes, being strip searched, being x-rayed, being taken across 1.5 hours of traffic in London in a vertical kind of little coffin in a Serco van, so the guy's exhausted by the time he gets there. And on his first day, has to go through this bizarre Kafkaesque, that's why I called this piece I wrote for Arena Kafka on acid and then Kafka on steroids. The next one's going to be called Kafka on amphetamines, if it doesn't go well, or maybe Kafka goes to rehab if it does go well. Let's see.
Yes. Okay. So, well, actually, before we go slightly more into the trial, you've already brought up the conditions he's living in at the moment. Let me ask for a start. Have you spoken to him at all recently, or is all your information indirect through his lawyers or something? Have you spoken to him? When was the last time you spoke to him?
The last time I spoke to him was in September last year when I went to visit him in Belmarsh.
Okay, so the information you're getting in for the last 6 months has been more a year. Has been indirect essentially. Okay, yes. So what's your understanding of, first of all, his health, state of mind? Like, has he gone nuts? Like, what's going on? Like the security situation. What's your understanding of where he's at?
When I saw him in Belmarsh, which is just a really awful place, he was a much thinner man than I'd known. And, this is a man with an incredibly strong mind. And we have a long association of talking a lot and till late at night and at the same time while the other one's speaking and answering constantly. And, so this is someone who I know quite well. And he had to kind of harness his thoughts a lot. He had to kind of stop and think in a way that was new to me. We were also in a very, the visiting room is a very large room. There's lots of people in there having visits and, there's lots of people hovering around. So it's not the most, easy place. But I saw my friend, I saw him twice. I saw him once with Vivienne Westwood and then the next time I saw him with Stella. And, he was there and he was a diminished person. And he is further diminished by, he's now been in there 18 months. The other day it was 18-month mark since he's been in a maximum security prison. At the moment on Channel 7, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but there's a show called Hello Belmarsh.
You can definitely say that.
That you can see, and it shows you what this place is like. And it's just a dehumanising, awful maximum security jail with terrorists and murderers and Julian. So his health is diminished. There was quite a lot of content about his health in the trial, in this resumed session, and the judge, in one of the few sympathetic rulings, agreed to not share those with the press and to not make those public. And many of the commentators and the tweeters didn't tweet those elements that went into his medical history.
You should tell all of them now,
because this is very private stuff.
Yeah, no.
But what is known is that Julian is autistic and Aspergic, and that's no surprise. One of my nicknames for him is the AAA, the autistic Aspergic albino. But that was before a formal diagnosis was made. But I'm pretty clever about this stuff. So we know that about him, and of course, who wouldn't be depressed? This guy hasn't seen a sunset for 10 years. Now, think of all the things that you've done in 10 years, the times you've been to bookshops, the presents that you've wrapped for people, the small intimacies, the nicknames you've made up, the things that you've grown in the garden. I could go on. And this is what he hasn't had. Also, he hasn't had the touch of his children or the sound of their voices. Alice Walker, the great writer, wrote last week a poem about Gabriel wanting to tell his dad about how he'd learned to count since he last saw him. So this is a person who's not only not had the internet, but he hasn't had sort of stimulation, content, books, hugs. He hasn't had for 18 months those things that he was able to still have in the embassy, much less towards the end. But this is a person who had worked out how to channel a tunnel through the confinement of a small flat in London. He seems to be kind of dragging himself through narrower and colder and wetter and darker tunnels in order to stay with us. And he's in a place which is people have died of COVID there. This is a very serious time in a resurgence of COVID in the UK. So health is in danger. When I visited him, he was in the health wing at Belmarsh, and he was the corridors were cleared when he moved through the jail. They were so scared of video being taken or I don't know what. But not only was he confined to himself in a cell for 23 hours a day, when he was out, when he was going to the phone or going to exercise yard, they would clear the corridors so that he couldn't see anybody. Since COVID has been in, he's been in solitary confinement without visitors. So when I could visit him, he had 2 visits a month. And then after the bail serving, he'd served time for bail, which was actually, the crime of seeking asylum and getting it. after he'd served that time, he could have some more visitors. But now, no visitors, not even from his lawyers, right? So that's just zero.
So how do the lawyers talk to him?
They don't. That's the problem. They
Yeah, okay.
don't. So there's some video conferencing, but also that's a very dangerous place to go into a video conference room confined where others have been, you know. So there's just health dangers inherent in everything.
And presumably any Zoom type conference is open to surveillance, presumably.
Totally surveilled.
Yeah. Okay, well let's get into the details of the trial.
Mm-hmm.
First, for a start, it's an extradition trial,
Yes.
right, to send from England to America. So if he isn't extradited, does he just walk free? Is that it?
On the 4th of January, the district judge, Vanessa Barreza, will give a verdict. If she rules in favour of him, the US will appeal. And I don't know whether that will require him to be kept in Belmarsh or not. It shouldn't. He shouldn't be kept in Belmarsh. He shouldn't be there now. It's absurd that he's there now. And there may be a bail application between now and then. I don't know.
Okay.
So it would make sense for this very well recognised person who has a family and children to be allowed to stay at home with his children. There's much less likelihood of anyone being able to skip any kind of bail.
Yeah, or at the very least, I would have thought that there is some kind of middle ground between Belmarsh and on a plane. Like, there's probably some middle ground there of perhaps even if you wanted to keep him under some kind of surveillance in some kind of light facility rather than terrorist jail. I thought there's some in between there. But anyway, yeah.
But let's consider what this is for too.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is for publishing true information that WikiLeaks wasn't even the first to publish.
Yeah,
right?
well, we're going to get to that.
We'll get to the details, but then, that's when, when you go into the details, into the rabbit holes of this case, you suddenly start to be confined by the kind of self-referring logic that is a result of this absurd situation, and you start to kind of, be confined to the absurd situation. It's absurd that even we're talking about this publisher being in a jail in the first place. So I just want to draw attention to that.
No, fair enough. Okay, and just to clarify, because I think there's a lot of confusion about this. You said there was some extra indictments dropped, but the base allegations are about collateral murder, right? The 2010 allegation, the 2010 leaks, in consultation with The Guardian and New York Times, those ones, right?
Well, look, there's none of the charges were dropped. So there's 18 of them.
Yeah.
And so what they relate to are the Guantanamo files, the Iraq war logs, the Afghan war diary, and the diplomatic cables.
Okay.
So it's all of those. And, most of them are about obtaining, receiving and publishing information, like what journalists do.
Yeah.
And one of them is related to Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, a conspiracy to violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And that's to do with a conversation between somebody that hasn't been proven to be Julian yet, even now, and Manning, in which there was a discussion about how to protect Manning's identity. Manning already had access to all that stuff. So this was about a journalist saying, are you safe? Can we do something? But we don't even know if that was Julian.
Okay, so that's the one where
17 to do with publishing, 1 to do with computers.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's the alleged leaking, alleged hacking kind of areas, right? Okay, so in terms of we'll start with the.
It's important that you don't use the word hacking, in fact, because it's not about hacking. It's about protecting the identity of Manning, who had authorised access to this stuff.
Okay,
wasn't hacking.
Well, let's call it cyber crimes. Let's call it. Okay, all right. So in terms of let's leave the cyber crimes aside for a second. Let's just talk about the publishing.
Yep.
Okay, so were those ones that were in consultation with newspapers or not?
Yeah.
They were. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's an important point to begin with. All right. Okay.
Right.
So secondly, I had no idea until I read about it that these things had been leaked before WikiLeaks. Had all of them been leaked before WikiLeaks, or just some of them?
Well, the diplomatic cables were definitely published in their unadulterated state by two outlets before WikiLeaks.
Okay.
And the Afghan war logs and the Iraq war diary, the Afghan war diary and the Iraq war logs were published in consultation, and a third of the Afghan material was redacted and withheld, and the Iraq stuff went through excessive, and this is what was discussed very interestingly in the trial, just the lengths went to for redaction. This has been this kind of often repeated, and when something's repeated so much, it becomes true. And this is a phenomenon that we're dealing with on lots of levels, on lots of different issues. But with this case, almost like it's a test case of seeing if you can make something completely not true stick. And so this concept of dumping, material online, not the case.
So
not the case.
So all the published materials in question, all of them were vetted?
All of them went through serious redaction process.
Okay.
So, and the stuff that ended up being released online was because of two Guardian journalists, the diplomatic cables were released completely because of them. But before that, it'd been 9 months of really properly going through them and releasing them in a drip by drip way.
When you say it was because of the two Guardian journalists, they gave up the password accidentally.
Not accidentally. They published it in a book.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not accidentally.
No, not accidentally at all.
Okay, all right.
And the Guardian still, it's so funny. They try this funny line to say, well, we thought it was a temporary website. They knew exactly what it was. It was to a file that was on the internet and could only be opened by that password. And it was duplicated and copied many times all over the place.
Okay.
So it was a terrible thing that they did, Luke Harding and David Lee, and they have to wear that. And that was gone through in great detail in this hearing.
Okay, so I feel like the publishing element of it. I mean, let's leave aside for a second the argument about this is clearly journalism. I've made that 1,000 times. That people are sick to death of hearing me talking about that there's something that could be published in the New York Times, in fact was published in the New York Times. It means that they could be jailed.
The New York Times and the Guardian editors of that time, they've all come out in support of him. And some people who were very angry with him and who had big problems with him have come out and said this is appalling and this is basically what we do every day.
Yeah, okay.
So
but I was going to ask though, let's turn to what we're now calling the cyber crimes.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, you dealt with the first issue, which is that this is all based on a chat conversation with someone called Nathaniel Frank.
That's right.
Who does Julian actually deny that he's Nathaniel Frank, or is he just saying prove it?
The defence produced several witnesses, one of whom had worked for the US Army as a cryptographer for 20 years and who reminded the court that the Manning trial had not identified who Nathaniel Frank was, and that still is the case. Okay. That still is the case.
Okay, so he's not going out of his way and saying, I am absolutely not him. He's just saying...
Prove it.
Prove it.
Yeah, it's the burden is on them.
But
what's in the indictment, if you read it, and it's very accessible and able to be read, what's in the indictment is an unsuccessful attempt to create an additional password to conceal the identity of Manning, who already had access to those materials. So it was about protecting sources. Right. And so it wasn't about, this person already had authorised access to this material, and this conversation, whoever it was between, I don't know. Manning has admitted that it was her, and the other side we don't know. We just don't know.
All right. Okay, there's a question that I was asked by my viewers, because I asked if any of them had any questions, and the question they asked was, which is actually a question I was thinking when I was reading about this last week, when I was assuming that Nathaniel Frank was Assange. I was going, well, why is he talking about this stuff anyway? I understand it was useless, but why is he talking about useless things? But if we're not going to take the leap to say Nathaniel Frank is Assange, then that's an irrelevant question. So let's leave that.
But it's not useless if it's about protecting sources, because that's like WikiLeaks.
If she didn't need protection, if she didn't need protection at that point in time because she'd already gotten everything she wanted.
No, not yet. Apparently not yet. In terms of the timing, that hadn't been released yet.
I see. Okay. All right. Okay. How do you? I mean, you know all the questions you get when it comes to Julian Assange. So let's ask the next one, which always gets asked, which is the question of, but these leaks cause so much damage.
So this is, I wish that we knew more about this alleged damage, because there has never been any evidence produced that there was even one source or alleged source of the US damaged in any way. And you'd think in, a trial like that of Manning's, that would have been used. But no. And senior people at the time said, look, this is embarrassing, but no one's been hurt. Also because there was all that time between the materials coming out in their unadulterated form and the US State Department and government knowing that this material was held by somebody. So, no, there has been no harm. And again, there's this kind of exclamation mark going off in my brain when the issue of harm comes up. Because what we're talking about here is so much harm revealed by WikiLeaks. 15,000 uncounted Iraqi civilians documented as dead and killed. We're talking about a war, the Iraq War, where 1 million people have died. We're talking about torture in Guantanamo Bay. We're talking about large-scale damage and harm. We're talking about murders. We're talking about horrendous stuff that nobody has seen the inside of a courtroom, let alone a jail cell, for, except the people who have revealed the crimes. So this is one, no evidence of harm. Still, you'd think after all this theatrics and this bizarre, indictment, you'd think there'd be some evidence of harm. No evidence of harm, none. And actually, the harm, this accusation of blood on the hands of WikiLeaks, when they've revealed blood dripping from the hands of very many people. Very many people. Okay.
So now I've been dealing until now with the allegations that have been levelled at Julian Assange, but I haven't actually dealt with the major legal issue of this whole case, which is that it needs to, and any extradition needs to not be political. Right. Now that's the actual thing that presumably is going to pivot on, because that's
one would hope.
That's the gate to get into all these extradition issues. That's not political. If it's political, no extradition.
Under the UK-US extradition treaty, yes.
Exactly. So, but my question to you is, how exactly do you show that something isn't political? Well, sorry, something is political, sorry. In this case, how you show that something is political, even if you just know it's obviously political, how do you show it in court?
Yeah, well, see, it's not just a postmodern, everything is political kind of, we all went to uni in the 80s. For example, one of the big issues that was pushed in the court case was a recognition that the Obama administration had decided against prosecution of Assange and WikiLeaks and had come out publicly and said so. Why? Because of the press freedom implications, because of what they called the New York Times problem, because they absolutely knew, and they'd done a good deal of research into exactly what had happened. They'd had grand juries, ongoing grand juries, so they were constantly combing through the options, and so they had all the evidence to hand that is now to hand, because this is a long time ago now we're talking about, and they ruled it out for that reason. So and then the Trump administration has changed tune, so that in itself is a political decision. It's a political decision because of the party in power. However, it gets more political when you look at the testimony of Jennifer Robinson. Many of your listeners would know her, an Australian human rights lawyer, has been working with Julian for a long time now. She was present and testified in detail to this fact that an emissary of President Trump, Dana, how do you say his name? Rohrabacher. Rohrabacher. Yeah. Came to the embassy with an assistant and put a proposal on the table. And that proposal was, reveal your source for the DNC hack to get it out of our hair, and you'll resume your life. And it was in those terms. And the senator made it clear that this was a direct from the president offer, that you'll have a pardon and walk and resume your life. Well, Julian, as a publisher and journalist, would never ever reveal sources. That's the integrity of the organisation, is that it's a whistleblowing protection organisation. It was designed to not even know the source. And in this case, again, Julian said no and reminded the emissary about the First Amendment and sent him on his way. Well, immediately down came the prosecution. So that is very political. That is like an emissary from a parliamentarian coming to your embassy and offering you a deal. Why? For a very political reason, because of things that happened in 2016's election and how that has been a hangover for Trump ever since. It gets worse. Cassandra Fairbanks, talk about worse. Cassandra Fairbanks, a journalist in the United States, produced a recording of somebody who admitted and acknowledged that Trump himself was giving the orders to proceed in the raiding of in the deals with the Ecuadorians to extract Assange and arrest him.
When we say someone, who's someone? Do we know?
Rick Grenville.
Oh, Rick Grenell.
Rick Grenell.
Yeah, no, he's a big deal.
He's a big deal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
he was the acting DNI, and
Yes.
so she's got a recording of them talking on the telephone.
Okay.
And
Wow. Okay, Rick Grenell is he's as you say, he was the
and
acting.
he was upset because she tweeted something, and he said, "I could go to jail for this," and all kinds of things. And you can find that online and see it.
Wow.
So
I did not know that.
okay, so and there's more. How much would you expect to pay for these steak knives? Okay, the judge stated an intention in the court case on the 26th of September to issue the decision after the US election. And this is what she said verbatim. I agree that one way or another, my decision will come after an election in the United States. Like, could it get more political, Chaz? It's, and as you say, this is significant because of the extradition treaty prohibiting extradition for political offences. Yeah. Now, if states were chasing down people accused of sexual misconduct, if states were chasing down people who were publishing with the same ferocity as that they've chased Julian Assange, I might say that this isn't political. But there's been such an absolute concerted effort. The police presence, the ways that the UK prosecution service bullied the Swedes to say this isn't just a normal extradition hearing. I don't want you to lose your backbone. I mean, we've got all these things from FOI to show that this is a very particular, isolated, targeted case by the United States. And then, of course, the Ecuadorians gave him asylum. So that's also very political, because he was without the protection of the country of which he's a citizen. That's a direct quote. But also because it was so obvious that US were going to prosecute this publisher for publishing. Okay,
now you mentioned that the Obama administration was pretty big on the New York Times problem. Well, a pretty important person in the Obama administration was the vice president.
Yeah.
So do we have any sense of what happens if Joe Biden wins the election?
There's contradictions there, isn't there? Because, Joe Biden called Julian a high-tech terrorist at the time of the disclosures in 2010. And also, yes, he was part of an administration that ruled this out. It's absolutely in the lap of the gods. I do know that the vice presidential candidate has gone on the record of saying, the prosecution of Julian Assange should not go ahead. So there's hope there.
Kamala Harris said that.
That's right.
Okay.
And this is a kind of a hardline law and order woman.
Yeah.
So there's been. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but
that's fine.
But there has been words about press freedom and the press freedom implications there. And Tulsi Gabbard has a bill before the Congress now about Snowden and Julian.
I'm not sure she's great friends with Joe Biden, though.
I know. It's so surprising. Yeah. Also, Hillary says she's with Russia. I don't
know. Before we move on to 2016, which we should bring up, do you have anything else to add about the trial that we haven't covered?
I think it's really important about the issues that you've brought up, the political nature of the prosecution, the journalistic activity, the meticulous redaction processes, and the question of harm. But, this and the computer forensic evidence, they were the things that I really, really emphasised. What I would also emphasise from the case was the descriptions, harrowing in their detail, of the places and the processes that Julian will face if he hits the US, ever. So the court that he will be hitting first is in the Eastern District of Virginia, where there's been been no successful defendant appearing there. Everyone goes down. Why? Because in that area of Eastern Virginia, that's where the NSA, the CIA, it's where all these big agencies are based. And so, the jury pool is drawn from the huge number of contractors and their families and their former contractors. So it's this, like John Kiriakou, who was a former CIA guy, he talks a bit about that court and the experience of it. There was also great discussion about the special administrative measures that he would, that Julian would enjoy, which is complete isolation. And then the prison that he would go to, ironically called Florence, one of my favourite cities in the world. Florence is in Colorado, and it is an architecture of suffering. It is designed so that you cannot hear the screams of someone, even if you wanted to. The depth of the isolation is so great in that prison. There was a lawyer there who represents someone who's been there for 22 years, and the prosecution were trying to dress this place up as though you could do macrame courses. And, it was just a big golf course resort. This is, like a very, very serious hellhole. And the likelihood is that this publisher, this gentleman, would write himself off. He would end his life. And so I've been, going through the war crime material and looking at the things that WikiLeaks has exposed about our society and about our history, and that's pretty disturbing stuff. But I was very disturbed by those descriptions of the hell of US prisons and the process. Just one other story I want to tell from the trial, which is that of al-Masri. Al-Masri was a torture victim, and it was because of WikiLeaks that his story was something that he could prove was true, and he could get recognised in the European court. Al-Masri was a German citizen plucked off the streets of Macedonia while on holiday, renditioned, taken to a torture place in Egypt and tortured. The US realised they'd made a mistake, and they spat him out after some great deal of torture, onto the streets of Albania. This European citizen was able to be heard, recognised and compensated, and he's, because of the cables describing this mistake being aired. And al-Masri was willing to testify for Julian. This is a person who must be deeply traumatised and probably just wants to forget about everything to do with this time. He was willing to put a statement and appear in court. And it was he was risking more exposure, harassment, who knows what kind of, re-traumatisation this process brought up. Due to technical difficulties, he was prevented from reading his own statement and was going to be translated, and the judge got irritated and said, no, look, just, you read out his statement to his defence lawyers. And Julian risked the ire of the judge to protest at this and said, I won't allow you to continue to silence a torture victim in this court. And I just found that whole sequence, read through Twitter, like a very moving thing, because this man who wasn't free but is now free was willing to stand up and go through it again for this man who should be free and isn't. So the case was just full of amazing statements. Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg, there was some big names, but there was also a lot of people who brought a lot of detail and a lot of insight, a lot of journalists. 3 days of senior, recognised, prize-winning journalists going on the record and being willing to explain to the judge and through this process to the world about what is at stake here. So I encourage people to look into these wonderful statements if they can.
I'll get you to give me a link afterwards. I'll put that in the homework up above in the blurb. You guys can have a look at that. Okay, so if this trial had occurred 5 years ago, probably would have gotten a different reaction than it's gotten now, because the left probably would have been a lot louder. And one of the reasons why the left probably are less loud now in defending Julian Assange than they would have been 5 years ago is because they're still pissed off about 2016. And what I'm referring to there is, obviously there is controversy about this. I don't want to either A, put you in a position where I'm asking you to give up information you don't want to give up, or alternatively argue about things we can't possibly know, because what's true, what's not. You know, we read reports. Are they right? Are they not? It's hard to know. But I want to ask you, first of all, what do you think exactly Julian Assange did in 2016, and what do you think of it?
Okay. In 2016, WikiLeaks received politically relevant information that even the New York Times said we would have had an obligation to publish, and did publish a lot of material about, and arising from the material both from the DNC and from and on Hillary Clinton. So Podesta in particular. So I think that, he had a journalistic responsibility to publish materials, and people say, but the timing was terrible. It's like the timing was appropriate, like before any election. That's when you want to know about your candidates. That's when, for example, you might want to know that the nomination process was cooked. So like the DNC is inoculated from ever behaving like that again in a corrupt fashion against a candidate because of what happened in 2016. 5 people had to resign at a very high profile time during the convention because what they'd done was wrong, was so wrong. They had cooked the process against Bernie. I mean, what can you say at a funeral and a wedding or on a first date? Bernie would have won, Like there's that was a terrible, atrocious thing that happened and that was relevant. The power of John Podesta, wow. I mean, really look at that. Look at the way in which that man was able to be in receipt of lists of names by Wall Street of who the Wall Street wanted the Obama administration to appoint in the key roles, and 95% of them were, right? John Podesta is like the Dulles brothers, kind of, a law firm, a lawyer who operated on behalf of corporations, who has his foot in political pies as well. Incredible nexus of power. The Podesta emails, it's sad that his email was such a poor one. His email password was so poor that even a 14-year-old could have hacked into it. Probably did. So So okay.
Sorry. Let me just focus the question a bit, because I personally think it's hard to argue that a publisher shouldn't publish newsworthy material.
Right.
Like
that's it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I would have if I was in his position, because that's what a publisher does. Right. The question I have is that I think some people are concerned, and I got a few concerns myself actually, which I'll bring up, and they're not going to be things that you're going to guess, because as always I have my own very, very special little things, little peccadillos that I get worked up at, no one else cares. But I'm more asking about, was there anything in the manner in which he carried himself during that period that bothered you at all?
Oh, if you look at my Twitter stream from that time, I have a few things to say to him. If you look at our DMs, you'll see some other ones. A lot of people hadn't had any sleep for a bloody long time at certain points, and I think that really showed. That there was some bad judgments. There's some DMs that I think Julian shouldn't have sent. I don't think any publisher should send that kind of stuff. So
that's one of them.
The DMs, yes. The DMs to Don Jr.
That's my number one. I'll just read it out for people that we're talking about. I'm sure you're talking about the same one I am, which was, "Hey Don, we have an unusual idea. Leak us one or more of your father's tax returns." And then the New York Times.
That's fine. That's a publisher, saying like use us. And,
But it's where it goes. Is there's if we publish them, it will dramatically improve the perception of our impartiality. That means that the vast amount of stuff that we are publishing on Clinton will have much higher impact because it won't be perceived as coming from a pro-Trump, pro-Russia source. Now, for me, he may well have been just trying to suck in Don Jr. to manipulate him to get some material to publish. Then that's probably ethically borderline, but the publishing bit would be totally fine with that. But the look of playing footsies with a political candidate and their family, in this case just his family, I think that's crossing a line in my particular view from an ethical point of view as a journalist. And is that the one you were talking about, or are you talking another one?
Yes.
No. Okay, right. Yeah, go on.
And it's my sense that there's ways in which that's not acceptable. There's also ways in which the context of a person who's been caged for a very long time and probably hasn't had any sleep for a long time makes it understandable, but I don't excuse it.
Sure.
The big elephant in the room that we should get to is Russia the source? And I think it's important to recognise that that's never been proven. The Mueller team had 19 prosecutors, 500 witnesses, 2,800 subpoenas. I looked this up for this show. And 500 search warrants, 230 orders for communication records, okay? 2 years, $32 million, and didn't find it, okay? Also, highly unusually, Julian went on Democracy Now!, I think it was, and said, a state is not my source. So that's all I know. I'm not inside any of it. I'm his friend.
I didn't.
So I don't know, but I think that Mueller had every opportunity to find out, and didn't find a collusion between the Trump administration and Russia, or communication between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks, right? And so constantly, every time bloody Roger Stone's name comes up, it's connected to WikiLeaks. And you look at the tweets at the time, and Julian saying, "We have had no communication with this bozo." Didn't use the word bozo. I would have. And after the fact, Roger Stone DMs him, and those have become public, and they were made public by Julian. There wasn't communication between these people, and that's also sort of gets missed in this repetition, this climate, this stirring up of this dam to make things muddy.
I wasn't going to ask you that. And the reason why... That's
it's so bloody obvious.
No. The reason why I wasn't going to ask you that was because there's no way you could know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, since we don't know who Julian says the source is, there's a very good chance that he couldn't know.
Exactly.
If there's a cutout,
right?
If Julian just knows I got it from person X and person X got it from Russian intelligence, there's absolutely no way that Julian could know that.
Right.
So to me, it's unless we have some kind of detail, it's just a grey area.
Right.
And I should say, by the way,
and in terms of the DNC leaks, the FBI haven't had access to a lot of the servers. It was this other company that had access to the servers, which I think is a little bit sus.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I should also say, while we're pointing out these disclaimers, that I have interviewed Julian Assange before in public and way back in 2017, and I asked him about Roger Stone, and his what he said then was consistent with what he said elsewhere for the record, which was, he said, "Look, Roger Stone is a joker. He just claims credit for everything.
Right.
I had nothing to do with him." Whether it's true or not, that's what he said, and he's been consistent about that. So I wasn't actually going to ask you about the whether Russia did it or not. I'll save that for the people with the evidence or lack thereof.
Right.
What I want to ask you about, though, is related to that, which is another one of those things where it's the behaviour that bothers me more than the any revelations. And that was, and once again, I'm sure you're going to know what I'm talking about immediately. In fact, I'll play you the clip. I'm talking about Seth Rich. I'm talking about this clip right here.
Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material, and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington? Because
we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States.
That journalist did a good job, by the way. I was going to say...
Yeah, but also so did Julian. Okay, so he stated two facts. And it was news. For 2 weeks, this guy had been shot, and people did know. This was in the context of the DNC leaks where everything was going crazy, right? He stated a fact. a 27-year-old has been murdered. He stated another fact that there's been no conclusion about what kind of thing it was.
Yeah.
I don't know whether at this time or not, Cy Hirsch had gone on the record as he did. You can hear that on YouTube. Him talking about the DC police and the FBI and this kid, Seth Rich. That's kind of interesting. Julian shouldn't have said necessarily our sources take risks, but that is also a statement of fact. Yeah. So all whistleblowers are really, really taking a big risk. And you've got to remember that every single document that's on the WikiLeaks website is the result of a whistleblower taking that kind of risk with their lives, with their livelihood. So the stakes are high. It was an unfortunate interview, but he's also stating facts.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying anything he said wasn't factual. I'm just saying that, okay, for a start, I'll just tell you my first reaction when I first saw that was, well, Seth Rich isn't the source because he's not going to name his source like that.
Right.
Like that was my first thought. My first thought was like you have to pull his teeth to get sources. He's not just going to drop huge hints like that. So that's clearly not the case. Mm-hmm. But the fact he's dropping these, and as you say, it's all factual, but the fact he's dropping them together, I think intentionally, in an atmosphere where this is 2017, right? At this point in time, the crazies are out. At this point in time, the crazies are everywhere, speculating wildly about stuff. There's no way he wouldn't have known that some crazy people were going to take that and run with it and make Seth Rich the new martyr. And so either Seth Rich is a source or he's not. If he is a source, I mean, Julian Assange would know if he's a source or not. If he's a source, and it's very strange he'd name his source, I don't think he would do that.
No.
If he's not a source, he's creating hell for Seth Rich's parents, carelessly, for reasons I don't understand.
What about Cy Hirsch?
I don't know.
Have you listened to the Cy Hirsch
I don't
tape?
know what's going on with Cy Hirsch, but I'm just talking about Julian, who knows more than anything.
But Cy Hirsch knows more about that particular case.
I don't think he knows more than Julian Assange about whether Seth Rich is a source for WikiLeaks. That only Julian Assange knows that.
Only Julian Assange knows that, but Cy Hirsch has a very good source in the FBI that stated that to him. Sure.
But yeah, I'm just thinking about from Julian's point of view. As far as I'm concerned, if he doesn't think that Seth Rich is one of his sources, I don't know what he was playing at there. He could have said all that stuff without mentioning Seth Rich. Mm-hmm. Like he could have said all that other stuff that was factual. Yep. But I put that together with another thing which annoyed me. This is my last one. It was back in 2016. It was like November 4. He put out a tweet which pissed me off so much. Mm-hmm. It was about spirit cooking. Mm-hmm. And it was, they mentioned spirit cooking in one of the Podesta emails, and he sent out a tweet saying, the Podesta's spirit cooking dinner. It's not what you think. It's blood, sperm, and breast milk, but mostly blood. And then there was a link to stuff about spirit cooking being all this human sacrifice. I asked him about that during my interview. I said, what the hell was that?
What did he say?
It was a joke. It was just a joke. And I go, what I said once again, you knew at that point in time the crazies were going nuts about everything, every single drop you were putting down. There was no way they weren't going to take that seriously and run with that. And he goes, "Oh, come on!" In the interview, he could not believe that he says, "You're supposed to be a comedian. It was funny." Like that was his attitude.
Yeah.
And to me, I feel like that and the Seth Rich go together as this kind of attitude of I thought I saw a couple of times where he wasn't taking his role, I feel, seriously enough as someone who is the dispenser of information for a large proportion of the internet, a lot of whom are mentally unstable and have run with this even to now. We're going to get to QAnon soon. Sure.
But remember, this is well before QAnon.
No, I know.
And also, I mean, I don't defend, like I've had screaming matches with Julian about Twitter, believe me. And
I'm not expecting you to defend this, by the way.
for me to say that I miss him on Twitter because I would just have so many fights with him. And we enjoy arguing. Yeah. I don't defend everyone's tweets. However, I also will add some context, not to defend that tweet or others. This is a person cut off from human society and whose only avenue in is the internet and its rather bizarre sense of humour at times, and Twitter's particular culture, which is kind of off quite a lot of the time. So for example, there was one night during 2016 when Julian said something about people with double brackets around their names, and I'd only just found out that day that it was anti-Semitism. And I can tell you he didn't know that, because I informed him at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, don't say that because that's what this is about. He goes, oh God, I didn't know. He genuinely didn't know. He made a what seemed like just like a crazy tweet in the kind of sandbox of Twitter, where things reverberated and in a strange pinballish way, contained within this ferocious tempest, which isn't the world, but it was his world. It was his only access to the world. Is this strange, cooked, weird culture that I don't think is a reflection of reality. And when you have other reference points and other access to people and can pick up phones and talk to people and go to meetings and experience the world, which he hasn't been able to for 10 years, then you do have a slightly strange kind of angle on things from time to time. So I'm not, again, excusing, I'm just saying that is relevant.
Yeah, it is.
When an individual's kind of character is like constantly assassinated based on strange tweets. How many strange kind of jokes have you been judged for? Like, quite a lot. But does he always have to be this serious, hyper responsible person online? Probably yes, because there was an amplified significance to everything that he said. Did he sometimes make mistakes? Yes, he's a human being. Yes. A pretty brave human being who's doing some pretty significant and has a big project with big ideas. Ways to rip them down are sometimes with these hooks called mistakes and tweets that I think are disproportionately used and amplified. Yes, I've had this conversation, 800 or 900 times. So
Now, I should say, having said all that, I suddenly turned to Jeremy Paxman there for a while. I should say that nothing that I said was illegal. Nothing that I said made him any less of a journalist.
That's right.
You can have your so don't think that with those critiques the reason I just leveled those critiques was I was just curious on your opinion.
Sure.
But I don't think you're his personal spokesperson. No. But just as someone who knows the guy, I just thought, I would like to know your angle. But but it doesn't change the law at all, and it certainly doesn't change what the law may be like if Julian Assange ends up on the wrong end of some of these decisions. Mm-hmm. So I just want to make that very, very clear.
Yes.
And I think that people who are pissed off with Julian Assange, everyone's welcome to their own views, should separate that pissed offness from the basics about the First Amendment in America and the ramifications for everyone else.
Maybe ask themselves too, why? Why do they hate this person quite as much as they do? Where might that have come from? WikiLeaks itself released several documents about how to destroy WikiLeaks and the kinds of lines and narratives to build up, which read like Nostradamus, like their prophecy, like they have all come to pass. Spook the moderates by hammering on about how much harm has been done when there has been no evidence of harm. Doesn't do anything for the crazies, but it really worries the professionals. Yes, tick, achieved. And I can go through them like a list. Nils Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, has said, don't blame yourself. If you believe that Julian Assange is a criminal and a rapist, you've been manipulated, and we've seen the documents. And if you still think he is, you're still being manipulated. Now, this is not a very clever line to help try and overturn people's opinions. It happens to be the truth. There has been like a most vicious and incredible psyop done on this guy, to the extent where one of my scary godchild. The first demo she ever went to, the first time she ever kind of crawled out of the window and went to something that she wasn't meant to go to as a young person was a demonstration in support of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. When I gave her a computer a while ago, she took the stickers of him off saying, I just don't feel good about it. We had a discussion about it. I was able to help her see certain things that have happened, to have turned her mind so strongly against him that might not be based on true facts. And I've had conversations over and over again with really clever people, good friends of mine, strong feminists, and said, really, these are the facts. And they've gone, wow. I had no idea. Why didn't I know? It's like, and why didn't you question the Murdoch version of the truth in this instance? there has been an incredible effort to rip this person down, to assassinate this character. Why? Well, we keep overcoming it. He keeps, people keep saying, well, okay, he might be, these comma-filled sentences. He's dirty, stinking, rotten, I mean, but I still defend him, okay. For a while, I was prepared to accept that. This is a funny, highly intelligent, gentle, thoughtful, kind man, right? I want to defend his character as well, as does, Patti Smith, Noam Chomsky, Zizek. Like, these are big, important people. And, maybe his character isn't that bad if all of these, funkadelic, cool people actually do call him a friend and are prepared to stand up for this person. So I am prepared to accept people only coming to their senses on the principles, but I want them to question also, why in particular do you think you hate this person you've never met quite as much as you do? I think it's worthwhile saying.
Oh, absolutely. And now I'm going to do something quite possibly very stupid, which is we've talked about Julian Assange for 70 minutes now. So anyone who isn't interested in Julian Assange has switched off. And anyone who is interested in Julian Assange doesn't want to hear us talk about anything else. But I'm going to try and change the topic.
Sure.
Is there anything else you want to say about Julian Assange before we do?
No, you did that about half an hour ago, and
Okay.
I've had my say.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
That's all right. I want to just talk about. First, I want to do a little bit of housework. Just off the back of the Wednesday show today that that you may have watched. You can see it on iView on our Facebook page, ABC Planet America. If you haven't, I just want to pick up something quickly, which you're probably going to have very little to say about. But yeah, if you do have something to say, jump on in.
Will do.
Which is, I mentioned something insane on our show today, which was policy. I know. It's insane because literally during this election, Donald Trump has zero policy. Not just it's on the website he doesn't talk about. It's not even on the website. I was looking for it, right? And Joe Biden has it on the website, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't know it. Like, it's written by someone. I don't know. But anyway, neither of these guys are the kings of policy. But I did mention some of Biden's tax policies on the show, and I want to just pick up on one of them, which I just brushed past. But for those who are interested in this, he's got a very interesting child tax credit policy, which I just want to just explain in more detail than I did on the show, just quickly, which is in America, the child tax credit currently offers $2,000 a year. Sounds great, right? We've got a similar kind of thing in Australia.
Isn't it a once-er in Australia?
I'm not sure.
I think it's a once-er. You get $2,000 when you produce a child.
I might as well not live in Australia. I don't know what the situation is here. But yeah, in America, it's every year. Okay. That's how it exists. It's a tax credit, though, which means you only get it when you pay your taxes. Okay. Right? You could deduct it from your taxes, right? Also, strangely, because this is America, it doesn't go to people who need it most, the poor. If you earn zero, you get nothing. Right. You get nothing until you get to $2,500 a year. Then it starts and phases in at a rate of 15% for every dollar. So you need to get to $11,833 a year of income before you get the full refundable credit. All right? That's how it works. Now, Biden's plan is to make that $3,000 a year per kid and $3,600 a year for a young kid. That's for children between 0 and 5. But there's a few, that's fine, more money, but that's not the thing which I think is worth mentioning. The thing I think is worth mentioning is you get it per month as a payment, and everyone gets it. People who earn zero get it in full. So that's a huge difference. It turns what is a middle-class welfare payment into a poverty payment. And it goes to everyone else as well, because you need to do that in America. Otherwise, people will never ever vote for a pure poverty payment. But this is the difference. All of a sudden, you've got people who earn nothing but have kids getting $250 a month, right? Which
huge.
That's real money,
huge, yeah.
right? And so the result of that is that it would drop this payment alone would single-handedly drop poverty amongst children from 14.8% to 9.5%. Just that alone. Right? So 4 million kids escaping poverty. Right? As far as deep poverty goes, it would fall from 4.6% to 2.4% for kids. Right? So that is a very simple little policy that no one's paying any attention to. It actually doesn't cost that much. He's got I know people are all into MMT these days, but he's actually got to pay for, which isn't much. I didn't write it down, but it's not much. It's actually pretty easy, and it makes a huge difference. So I just want to just give him a tick for that. I don't know if he's across his own policy, but if he is, good on you, Joe. That's a good one. Right? That's another bit of housekeeping. I want to answer a question from our Facebook page about South Carolina, which I did answer. I did send them an article that explains what I'm about to explain. But for everyone else, it's an interesting question. There's a lot of excitement being generated about. Sorry, did you have anything to say about the?
No.
Okay. About Jamie Harrison versus Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is the guy that a lot of Democrats love to hate because he used to be the Republican they liked. Like, he was the guy who used to call things out. He was the number one person to take down Trump back in 2016.
Quite an insulter.
And now he's number one butt kiss, number one golf buddy, right? And so he's kind of done a few heel turns when it comes to prime. Like, everyone's a hypocrite in Washington, but he's primo grade A hypocrite, over and over again. And so people are watching this Jamie Harrison guy quite closely because he's tied with Lindsey Graham. And they're saying, is it possible that Lindsey Graham could lose South Carolina? It's possible, but it's unlikely. And let me tell you why, just very quickly. Now, Jamie Harrison's raised a huge amount of money, $57 million in the third quarter. Like, to put that in context, Beto O'Rourke was the previous record holder. And in his third quarter in 2018, he raised $38 million. Whoa. So it's just blown. For one state. And it's not a huge state either. $57 million in one quarter. So that's a lot of money, right? And he's tied. So, could that pull him over the edge? What I would say is that you need to realize about South Carolina, and a lot of these southern states are like this. You're going to find this more and more of an issue over the next few decades if you go the long haul with this. A lot of southern states are very sticky with their vote, which is they basically give the Democrats 40% or 41 or 42%. Bang, before you even, doesn't matter who you are, even if you're, Dr. Evil, you're getting 42%. It doesn't matter. But every extra percent past that is almost impossible. Like, the battle lines are very, very, very well drawn and reinforced with brick. In terms of South Carolina, they got their electorate's 28% black and 27% college degrees, which are perfect for Democrats, those two, right? And that gets you to 43, 44% of the vote. Obama won 45%. He won 44%. In 2018, the Dem running for governor got 46%. Joe Biden's going at 45%. It's always 44, 45, 46, right? But in the case of Lindsey Graham, people get a little bit excited because if you look at the polls, Donald Trump keeps on getting between 5 and 10 points more amongst Republicans in South Carolina than Lindsey Graham does. There's this there's this group of Republicans who just hate Lindsey Graham, probably because they remember what he was like before he was a Trump supporter and they don't trust him,
right,
with good reason. They're seeing themselves as the next Democrats pissed off with like the equivalent of the Republican version of the Democrats who are currently pissed off with Lindsey Graham in 5 years' time when he turns coat again. And so, so Morning Consult, for instance, has found 84% of South Carolina Republican voters backing Graham compared to 93% who support Trump. CBS YouGov, 76% of Republicans support Graham, 88% support Trump. There's always this gap. So people are getting their hopes up, but it just hasn't been done. So... But
the money does talk. Okay, first of all, I've got a huge family in America, and they're all in North Carolina. So I have a little bit of insight into what you're saying about how locked things are, and you're right. There's a study that shows whoever spends the most money wins. Full stop. In every US election since the war. The money will make a difference.
It will.
Yeah.
But they didn't get Beto O'Rourke over the line. And it gets you close.
Yeah.
It gets you real close. I mean, we'll see. The reason why you go, well, why not? Well, don't be so Debbie Downer, Chaz. Like you're giving all the reasons why he could do it. What I'm saying is his polling isn't over 46%.
It's not there. Yeah.
Like Graham's polling's also 46%. but he's got to somehow, until I see Jamie Harrison getting 48s and 49s in a poll, he hasn't breached the wall. He's still just pushing it against that wall. And those undecideds, they're on the other side of the wall. So they'll come back to Graham. You watch. They'll come back to Graham. It doesn't matter what they say now. Unless you can get them over that wall, they're going back to Graham. So, so come to me when you see Harrison higher than 48% in a poll, and then I'll be a true believer. But until then, ain't gonna happen. All right. So something else from the show quickly, and then we'll get back into your areas. There's something actually you might have something to say about this. Mm-hmm. We talked about a story which has gotten much play on the internet. I'm sure you saw it as well on Twitter. They're loving it. I'll read you the quote. It's from a New York Times piece. It's from I think a Haberman piece from memory. Talking about Trump when he had COVID. In several phone calls last weekend from the presidential suite at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, Mr. Trump shared an idea he was considering. When he left the hospital, he wanted to appear frail at first when people saw him, according to people with knowledge of the conversations. But underneath his button-down dress shirt, he would wear a Superman T-shirt, which he would reveal as a symbol of strength when he ripped open the top layer. He ultimately did not go ahead with the stunt. Now, we talked about it on the show, and I said, I joked around saying, well, geez, I hope that's a joke, because I'm assuming that's a joke because I can't even consider the alternative. But I actually seriously do think it's a joke. I think that there is an ongoing thing with Trump which creates constant issues with the press that no one ever thinks he's joking. Mm-hmm. And he is often joking. Mm. I really do think, and I've got an example to illustrate what I'm talking about, which was, this was another story along these lines. It wasn't a story, but this was something that Twitter went nuts for earlier in the week. Hang on, or is it? It's this one here.
They say he never laughs. So he doesn't really have a sense of humour.
He doesn't laugh, but he does make jokes.
Yeah.
They're often cruel jokes.
Yeah.
But he does do a thing in dry, wry kind of humour. And this is an example I'm about to play.
I'm back because I'm a perfect physical specimen and I'm extremely young. And so I'm lucky in that way. And seriously,
what were your symptoms?
I don't have heart problems. I don't have diabetes. I don't have any of the problems that you read about. Perhaps a couple of pounds we could lose here and there, but, there's a lot of people in that category.
Okay, so all over Twitter. Oh, my God, he's so young and he's a perfect physical specimen.
Yeah, he's definitely joking.
He's clearly joking there. Maria Bartiromo, someone who's his friend, so who knows what he's like, she laughed. Yeah. And then straight after that, he did I need to lose a few pounds. He did it in his most humble brag way, but at the same time, it's obvious he wasn't serious, but people took him seriously. All over Twitter, they were taking him seriously. And Nancy Pelosi, she introduced this 25th Amendment thing, and the example she gave is, look at the president who thinks he's a perfect physical specimen and he's extremely young. She cited that joke, and none of the reporters said, hang on, that's a joke. They all took it seriously. They all take it seriously. And I feel like this happens over and over again with Trump, where he makes these dry crack. I mean, they're not... Like, he's not going to win any comedy awards. I'm not saying he's going to win the Barry Award. I'm just saying that he's not serious. He gets treated as serious. And that Superman thing, you can so see him on the phone saying he's going to do that in a similar kind of dry way. And people bitching about it.
And some of his alarmed advisors might have screamed bloody murder and don't do it.
Exactly.
Because they do backfire on him for this reason, but they're also more coverage. Like, he's a genius at that, isn't he?
Well, that's true. I'm not sure he wants that coverage, but yeah, but sure. And also, obviously, that's a third-hand story as well and all the rest of it. But I feel like that is something that people should pay more attention to. Yeah. The possibility that Trump isn't always 100% serious. Like people are going to think I'm making excuses for him, but I just think it's true.
But how does he get away with it? Like, for example, last night I was listening to Anderson Cooper because I'm crazy and I listen to it every night. And there was a reporter coming into CNN from the Florida, COVID massive spreading event that Trump did yesterday. And what song was going on in the background? Macho Man by the Village Men, the Village People, right? Yeah, so these are like flamboyantly out gay men prancing around. Their song is being pounded to evangelical QAnon Trump supporting crowds surprise. I thought, okay, that is actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
But probably, that they're taking it literally because they don't don't remember the 80s, or I don't know. Like, they don't know that this is like, a bunch of gay men running around in costumes looking great.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that actually. As in the next topic, I want to bring up because you've told me before that you're into watching Anderson Cooper and Rachel Maddow and all those people.
I'm morbidly fascinated.
Yes.
It's a terrible crack I'm on.
Well, I especially given our previous conversation, I know that you're not exactly a Russiagate convert. So I'll be interested to know how you feel when you're watching all these shows. But I'll get to that in a second. Just before I do, I want to, because we need to bring up the Durham report as well. Before I do, I just finish off that Pelosi thing. I just want to say, as an aside, because I'm not going to mention it anywhere else, that 25th Amendment Commission idea she has, I think it's a real good one. Let me just explain quickly what it's referring to.
A year ago.
Was that?
A year ago it would have been a good idea.
But it's not for Trump.
No, okay.
She'd never get up for Trump because Trump has to sign it into...
Oh, okay.
It's a law she has to pass, which Trump has to sign. Trump's not going to sign... Back in 2017, this is the way you can get rid of me.
Yeah, right.
So that's fine. This is not for Trump.
It's for the future.
It's for the future. It's for the future. In the what it's referring to, Section 4 of the 25th Amendment says, whenever the Vice President and the majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the President pro tempore of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the Vice President shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting President. So, as it stands at the moment, you need to get half of you need to get a majority of the people that Trump has hired as his underlings and the Vice President to get him to step down if he goes crazy. We shouldn't say Trump,
this
the president.
body that you emphasise.
This is what I'm going to say. Yeah. This is what I'm going to say. But before now, there was nobody.
Nondescript.
So that was the only option. Now, Nancy Pelosi is creating a body. Okay. This is what she's doing. She said, let's create that body. We as Congress want to create that body by law. This is the body.
Makes sense.
The body is 17 people, right? Democrat leaders get to fill 8 seats. Republican leaders get to fill 8 seats. Those 16 people get together, choose the chair, who's the 17th person, okay? Out of those 17 people, 9 by law would have to be physicians. At least 4 of those 9 must specialize in psychiatry. The other 8 members will be former high-ranking executive branch officials, former presidents, vice presidents, top cabinet secretaries, or surgeons general. All right, so you've got lots of expertise there, lots of experience, right? But importantly, none of them are in hock to the president. All right, none of them owe the president anything. The commission would study the president's health as well as request an exam of the president. If the president refuses, the commission could make a judgment on the president's condition with the information they already had and take into consideration his refusal. And so then they give their report. But you still can't remove him without the VP. So there's still a check. There's still a check and balance of at least one person who is in the president's corner, presumably. And Pelosi has explicitly said this is not about Trump. As I said, it's not going to work for Trump. Trump's not going to sign it in. She says it applies to future presidents, but we're reminded of the necessity of action by the health of the current president. That's diplomatic. And Trump then, because he just didn't really follow what was going on, clearly did an I know you are, but what am I type statement. Said, I don't think Pelosi could pass basic aptitude tests personally. I really don't. I don't believe it, he said. Sorry.
Pelosi just had a very big spit on Wolf Blitzer, which undermines her...
her compass mentis?
No, just her calm demeanour.
Okay.
She's usually quite a calm person, isn't she?
That's coming for Friday, I feel, because I don't know that. But yeah, but I just think this is a great idea. Like as in, and Trump did actually hit on, I don't know if this was just him taking a shot or if he actually thinks this, hit on the potential this could affect Biden. Because Biden will sign this in. Yeah. He'd sign this happily. And this could affect Biden if he falls off the tree in 4 years, like which he well could. So maybe Biden is the one this was, but leaving aside Biden, it's not about the personalities.
On principle, in terms of a democratic oversight and accountability.
It's about the system.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great thing to add to this. And I really, really, really hope that either Trump signs it knowing it can't affect him, or Biden signs it as part of a good government measure if he wins the election. I'm sounding too sure that Biden's going to win. I shouldn't do that. But anyway, I just wanted to flag that. That's a great bit of policy.
Interesting.
And forget about the trolling Trump bit. It's actually just good policy. Okay, now let's get back to what we're talking about. So you're watching your Anderson Coopers, you're watching your Rachel Maddows. We've been talking about the Durham Report on and off on the show for ages. The Steele dossier is just a dumpster fire. And I have to say, I find this really frustrating, the Steele dossier. And the reason why is because people just go to their partisan sides where they just go, they essentially they don't care about it at all unless they're looking to bail Trump out with it. Like going, oh, Steele dossier is garbage. Therefore, all the people who criticize Trump are lying and it's all a hoax. No, you can simultaneously have a situation where Manafort is as dodgy as hell, and Trump ran a shoddy campaign, and
he's a criminal,
and he's got financial ties potentially to all kinds of dodgy people, and the FBI are also dodgy as all hell. Yeah, you can have Canasta, you can have them all. Yeah, and so I find this topic very frustrating for that reason. Yeah, but I want to get your vibe on it all. First of all, your feelings about the Steele dossier, and secondly, your feelings about watching the coverage of the last 3 years.
That's why I started watching it, because I could not understand how it was possible. In 2016, I remember when the Russia stuff first came out, I laughed. I just thought, how interesting, what a great ploy to try and stir that old stick, that latent anti-Soviet, Reds under the beds, deeply embedded, a huge part of right up until the 80s, of thinking. I just couldn't. I didn't think it would work. I just couldn't believe it. That, we're back there again. It's this kind of strange hangover. I know a lot of people who were communists and who were Reds under the beds. I used to work for WILP, that was considered a communist front. So I've been red baited, and I'm not a communist. I'm an anarchist. But anyway, interesting. I just couldn't believe it. And so then there was, with this morbid fascination, I was trying to follow. And Rachel Maddow reads out large chunks of text from documents, which I find very handy. I can't watch the show, but I can listen to it. But I recently watched a CNN episode just to remind myself of that just wonderful satire, but also to what has become normal in television is so insane, and even more so than when you were making CNN, right? I mean, it's amazing that this, these networks are just simply trolling one person. They're targeting an audience of one person. They're trying to harass this guy, and they're giving him so much more coverage than they really should. There's so much else going on in the world, but they're fixated in this kind of really strange way. But yes, I started watching these shows to try and follow how this Russia thing was going to actually go, and was it really going to I don't know, end up with people being on the electric chair, like as it did in the past, what are we really looking at here? So the way that something becomes this lightning rod, or I don't know if that's the right term, but just the vehicle that's underlying and over, it's got this sort of profound relevance. This Steele dossier, this former MI6 guy, so much authority. Read Luke Harding's book called Collusion. It's so funny because it just gives so much credibility to this guy who obviously had dodgy sources, right? And so now we know. So there's this
dodgy source.
Subsource. This Brookings guy who was relaying booze hound chat. I mean, hilarious. And that was such a stick used to stir the pot. But really, it was one of these things that now everyone's kind of writing off with a sort of parenthetical aside of just the discredited. It was the salacious details. It was the way that he was built up as this incredible source. It's amazing just how dodgy the kind of, who was paying him, how it all came into being, this Steele dossier. It's 35 pages. I've read it several times. And it incriminates Trump and says that he's this kind of target of blackmail because of these, incriminating evidence that the Russians have on him. And it kind of talks about Carter Page and Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen.
We should say, by the way, you're probably getting to this anyway, but we should just emphasise that as dodgy as Steele dossier is, every time we bring it up, we should mention that did not start the investigation.
No.
It was the Papadopoulos thing that started the investigation.
It started the FBI investigation.
Yeah, the FBI
exactly.
investigation.
Yeah.
And
very important to notice.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so that would have existed without the Steele dossier.
Yes,
But
the Steele dossier was cited in the FISA warrant.
Oh, so it was central to the FISA warrant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was, the way in which the FBI and others got a surveillance warrant of Carter Page. And under the surveillance rules, this is what Snowden has kind of exposed. Under the FISA rules, anyone who is 2 hops from the person who has a FISA warrant is caught up in that.
So even though Carter Page no longer worked for the Trump campaign, you could
everybody
essentially
it caught everybody.
Yeah,
caught everybody.
catch the lot of them. Yeah. Which is important. That's one of the reasons that's so important. Another reason, by the way, it's so important is that you don't know that this warrant process is happening.
Right.
You can't defend yourself. There is no defense. It's not an adversarial system. It's just the FBI going up to a judge and saying, here's the truth. The judge who's
usually technically completely incompetent.
Yeah. Well, clearly now we can see that the judge isn't a very good judge
about technology.
The judge seems to be a rubber stamp. They said the judge wasn't a rubber stamp, but in hindsight, the judge is looking pretty rubber stampy. And
at first, the judge knocked it back and said, it looks like you're kind of wanting to spy on political operatives, but then it was obtained. And then it was renewed 3 times, each for 90 days each. But at first there was a pushback, apparently.
But just the fact that you can have, thank you for correcting me there, but the fact that you can have such serious surveillance on anything and anyone anywhere near you without an adversarial process, without you even knowing about it, being able to defend yourself, that to me makes it very, very important when the FBI abuse their position to lie. That's what they're doing. They're lying. When they're presenting the Steele dossier, they knew it was bullshit. They knew it was bullshit because they interviewed the subsource themselves. Right. So they knew it was bullshit.
But also in recent days, an FBI agent has admitted that they changed one of the facts. And it's a pretty important one. It's a pretty big one, that Carter Page actually was a source for the CIA.
Yeah, this is Kevin Kleinsmith, who is definitely going to jail. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's amazing that was able to happen. So there was this kind of behind the scenes, very practical, tangible, like mechanisms being triggered. And then there's also this whole media circus that's just building up and building up and building up, and books are being written about this Steele guy, right?
Well, that's a great point because, and we should just develop that a little bit more. That's a great point that
and Steele did go on to be a source for Crossfire Hurricane, and he was paid by the FBI, as well, quite a lot of money. Yeah,
your media circus is a good point because the Steele dossier broke in January 2017. It took until November 2019, I think, when the Inspector General report came out, maybe December. It was the end of 2019. Yep. So that's 3 years, effectively.
Yep.
3 years. Not only were intelligence spooks on air constantly talking about this stuff, but the Trump
major spooks, like the former head of the CIA, right?
Totally,
like absolutely building this up, knowing
it's bullshit. That's right. Yeah. Now that's it. Now I'm no fan of Donald Trump. Anyone who follows me knows that. Yeah. But he was unfairly maligned. For 3 years, and I'm not saying Obamagate. I'm not doing that stuff. No. What I'm saying is that there were people who knew this was bullshit, who allowed it to happen and could have stopped it happening. Yeah. Like and they didn't have to call a press conference. They could there are ways they could have got it out. Yeah. Maybe don't trust the Steele dossier. It wouldn't have been that hard. They should have done it as soon as it leaked back in January because they knew then it was crap.
To BuzzFeed.
That to me is bad.
And that the Inspector General Horwitz's report has gained pretty close to zero coverage as well. He talks. It was in December 2019. Yeah. A multitude of extensive compliance failures was found, and basic and fundamental errors. I mean, that's pretty big. That's pretty big. So and it added to the climate where collusion was the go. And then the Mueller investigation, I mean, this guy was built up to be some kind of god. And the process, yes, it yielded all kinds of criminal behaviour. And also a lot of people tricked into lying and being stupid enough to lie, right? And people like Flynn, who should know better. and who had some arguments, So when there's a transition team established, but the US process allows for folks from both sides to be briefed in case one of them becomes the president, becomes the ruling party. And that's appropriate. That helps that seamless kind of peaceful transition of power, which we're not going to see, I don't think, in January. Anyway, and so it was actually appropriate in some ways for Flynn to be on the phone to Kislyak. Kislyak, the ambassador?
Yeah.
Kislyak, there was all kinds of ways that flagging, let's tone down, the tension between our countries, an appropriate thing for a senior diplomatic role or security role to play. He lied about those calls. That's what he got done for, not the fact of them. Because that wasn't illegal behaviour, but it was built up to be this horrendous betrayal. And this traitorous, treasonous craziness became this normalised language and just repeated and repeated and repeated. And so it's very hard to crack through that once that's become the fusion with Trump and Russia, and then the fusion with Julian and Russia. Hilarious, just completely hilarious and wrong, but such a reality and a truth in so many people's minds because of this repetition. Yeah, no, that is true. And I was going to say at one point in time they were talking about trying to nail Flynn with the Logan Act, which is an act where I've gone on about this on this podcast before, an act where you're not supposed to negotiate against the president, like in a different way to what the president would with a foreign power, which has never been actually used, the Logan Act. It's been around for hundreds of years, never been used because obviously it's unconstitutional. It's a massive violation of your First Amendment rights of free speech. So it's anyway, it's a ridiculous law, and the fact they're even considering it is a joke. But there should be a law about, and as there is in this country, a kind of a convention that's broken and flagrantly broken lately by Christopher Pyne and Julie Bishop, that as a minister, you should not be able to go into the field in which you have just been, intimately in power, right? So too should it be, with folks like Brendon, senior intelligence and, national security office holders, shouldn't be able to cook the narrative quite as much as they are in mainstream media. I mean, that shouldn't really be allowed. We've got a similar case here in Australia at the moment where, a person who was involved in our very powerful intelligence oversight committee in Parliament has just quit Parliament and gone to work for Palantir. A security surveillance company that is selling hardware, software to our national security state. That shouldn't be allowed, right? So, but this trend of these former, very senior, powerful, spooks shouldn't be able to be in the media like this and to be commissioned and have these national security commentator, whatever their role is, I can't remember, but on MSNBC and CNN, Clapper and Brennan are just cranking out the truth, but always, and you'll notice this over and over again, I can't tell you the whole truth. Schiff is also an absolute master at this, this suggestion, the power of suggestion, the power of saying, look, you have to just trust me, I've got access to the stuff. And I can't, for national security reasons, disclose it to you because it's so important and I'm so important. It's an amazing way of cooking the narrative, and it's dodgy as. I should also say, by the way, that the other thing they knew was that this guy was a suspected Russian agent as well, this subsource. Yes. Yeah, you'd think they'd mention that to the FISA court. Yeah. Anyway, but there is a funny little coda to all this, which is in that insane phone call of Trump's to, I think it was to Maria Bartiromo again, the other day, he made a few demands.
These people should be indicted. This was the greatest political crime in the history of our country, and that includes Obama and it includes Biden. These are people that spied in my campaign, and we have everything. Now they say they have much more, okay? And I say, Bill, we got plenty. You don't need any more. We got so much, Maria.
Okay. So, as always, you got this nugget of outrage, and Trump turns it into, Obama and Biden were personally spying on me. They should be indicted. Everyone should be indicted, etc. Okay. But the thing is that what's interesting about that is you can see he's got the shits with Bill Barr because the Dunn report is not coming out before the election. Yeah, and
with Pompeo, which is wonderful.
Yeah, we'll get to that as well. Maybe we won't, we're running out of time. But the Durham report is into all this stuff, right? The investigation. Look, I got to say, I was sus about the Durham report. Firstly, because Bill Barr was the one who initiated it, and I'm pretty sus about Bill Barr.
Sure.
But secondly, I was sus because I wanted to give Durham the benefit of the doubt because he's a respected lawman. But when the IG report came out, and I loved that IG report. I thought that was the least tainted report I've seen for the last 4 years. I thought it was just beautiful. Like he didn't overstate anything.
Exactly.
He provided all the evidence. It was beautiful. When the IG report came out, the Inspector General said that he thought there was enough predication for an FBI investigation back in 2016 with the Papadopoulos stuff and whatever else there was at the time. Right? He said there was enough predication. Now, he emphasised that's a very low bar.
Right.
That's an extremely low bar.
Right.
He emphasised that. He said, but low as the bar is, it clears it. Right? And then Barr and Durham, talking about low bars, Barr and Durham came over the top and put out a statement saying they disagreed with him.
Yeah.
And I thought, what the hell is Durham doing when he's in the middle of an investigation, weighing in politically over the top of what is clearly a very fair statement from the Inspector General? That's not his business. Why is he weighing in? Shut up, Durham, and worry about your investigation. You can speak when it's your turn, right? Anyway, and the thing which made me most nervous was that what he said was that he thought there was predication for a preliminary investigation, not a full investigation. Now, for those, I'm not going to go into the details because I haven't written them down, but trust me, I've been through this before. The difference between a full and a preliminary investigation is nothing as far as your powers go. The FBI's powers under those two are identical under those two investigations. Okay, it makes no difference. So now that may make a huge difference to the bureaucrats, whether it's a preliminary or whether a full. And by all means,
but the machine is the machine. And it has the tools at its disposal.
Absolutely. And I've got no problems with Durham. Getting into the triplicate and the fine print and going, no. Let's practice legal niceties here. No problems with that. But when he comes over the top and says he disagrees that there was a predicate for a full investigation, and what he means is, the predicate was just for a preliminary investigation. No one understands that. Right. People at home don't get that. They are being misled into thinking that Durham's saying there's no predicate for anything, but that's not what he's saying. And so what that tells me, this is what I was thinking in December last year, that told me either Durham was a hack or Durham was easily manipulated by Bill Barr to say things he doesn't mean to create a negative impression.
But it undermines the authority of his own report that's
coming
eventually.
Absolutely.
Surely.
But having said that, I now take that back because the fact that he is clearly under massive pressure from Donald Trump, from that grab I just played, I can only imagine what's happening behind the scenes. And he knows that the whole Republican Party is desperate for this report to come out before the election. He's saying no. It's not coming out before the election.
And is that why they're going again for like talk about a cucumber burp? Hillary's emails.
I'm sure that is part of it.
It must be. There needs to be some kind of dodgy, nefarious, ugly kickback to that feeling of 2016. The fact that that's desperate, though, that shows how desperate they are.
Pure desperation.
Because even Republicans are going to be saying, really? Hillary's emails, can we please put them to bed?
I find it difficult to see how that's going to affect people voting for Joe Biden. Right. Whatever is in Hillary's emails. Right. But
But it's significant that Trump is saying mean things about Pompeo on radio because it harks back to what the treatment that Jeff Sessions, not someone I have sympathy for, but I found myself going, oh God.
I know, me too. Couldn't believe it. Yeah. When Trump took over, I was on air and I was talking about the cabinet, incoming cabinet. And I said, and I went through them all. I had hopes for this one. So the only one I don't have any hopes for was Jeff Sessions. He turned out to be the one with integrity. Right. I was wrong.
And he was graceful in how publicly humiliated and tortured he was. He was actually graceful in the face of that.
Mind you, he was terrible with immigration, which is what I expected. But at least he stood up in some respect for the rule of law. Yeah. This is the grab from Pompeo, just for those who are interested.
So she had 33,000 emails. Forget about what was on the emails. It's irrelevant. Although many of them were classified, highly classified, and you go to jail for that. But and they're in the State Department, but Mike Pompeo has been unable to get them out, which is very sad. actually, I'm not happy about him for that reason. He was unable to get him out. I don't know why. He's running the State Department, you get him out, but they're in the State Department.
So, yeah, Pompeo is his number one sycophant, and he's having a go at him.
Right. I mean, that really says something to me.
Yeah.
And the fact that Pompeo has, I've got an article up here of something that Pompeo has said. It's like, we're going to look into that, and there'll definitely be something before the election. Well, talk about, just like a hangover from some of the most questionable parts of 2016 that they are prosecuting people and are motivated to attack people for. But they're going to, but he assures us that he's never seen President Trump do anything that would put any kind of asset or anyone in any of our offices in harm's way. But Trump was saying, I don't care if they're highly confidential emails. The whole point was that Hillary had communicated classified emails over an insecure network. And so now Trump's saying, let's get them out there.
Yes.
Wait a second. Really? Classified, important US secret material should be just thrown out there? Oh.
There is a punchline, though.
Yeah.
There is a punchline. I mean, that's a great observation.
Boom, boom.
But the punchline is that as part of this process, he now tweeted, I have fully authorised the total declassification of any and all documents pertaining to the single greatest political crime in American history, the Russia hoax. Likewise, the Hillary Clinton email scandal. No redactions. Okay, you know what BuzzFeed have done?
What?
They've gone straight to court and requested the entire Mueller report, unredacted.
Right.
Because that is related to...
Well, I think Epic have been in court,
Russia.
requesting that for a long time.
Yeah, well, now they can use that tweet because
Right.
because the courts have decreed that the tweet is an official statement.
communication.
Yeah, and so that tweet may well get the full unredacted Mueller report into the
That'd be
public
quite
stream.
handy for me. I really like that.
So that would be very, very interesting indeed. Now, I'm way over time here, but I wonder, given that that you don't come every day, I want to take advantage of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw to you some of the topics
Yep.
that you have flagged to me beforehand.
Sure.
You have an interest in, and you pick one of them.
All right.
And this is how we'll finish off. Okay.
right.
We got Cambridge Analytica. We've got QAnon. We've got US bases.
Okay, yeah. It's either QAnon or the Cambridge Analytica report. Can we just briefly do them both? Like really briefly? Because what's happened recently in England is important.
I won't interrupt. You just go.
So the UK Information Commissioner concluded recently that Cambridge Analytica's harvesting of Facebook data didn't affect the Brexit campaign.
Did I say anything about America?
Nothing, because that's not what their mandate was.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So very important fact. So the Information Commission apparently went through 700 terabytes of information. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And 300,000 documents seized from Cambridge Analytica, right? This kind of dodgy company.
Yeah.
So fair enough. There wasn't a connection between Cambridge Analytica and Brexit because of the data that they were collecting from Facebook was about US voters. Okay, so that makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, fine. The commissioner did observe that a Canadian outfit called Aggregate IQ, which was closely linked to Cambridge Analytica, had bought a bunch of ads for the pro-Brexit campaign. In fact, £2.7 million worth. That's a lot. But they didn't even get their data. Aggregate IQ didn't get their data from Cambridge Analytica. So that link, is weak. What Chris Wiley, that pink-haired whistleblower from Cambridge Analytica,
him from every TV show on earth about 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Yes.
So he came prominently forward to Carol Cabotler of the Guardian, and in his book he says that the Vote Leave campaign had used secret Cambridge Analytica subsidiaries to spend dark money to propagate disinformation on Facebook and Google Ads. Okay?
Sounds scary.
It does. It's important to note Chris Wiley, he left Cambridge Analytica in 2014.
Ah.
So his insights into this in particular, I mean, I was in the UK in 2016 when all this all happened. So but he must have had sources, probably Brittany Kaiser, okay. And Brittany says at the start of this film, that we all know, that she's in called what is that film called? The Great Hack.
Okay.
She says, I have evidence that the Brexit campaigns and the Trump campaigns were conducted illegally. That's what she says at the opening of the Great Hack. And so she appears at a Leave.eu campaign launch talking about Cambridge Analytica. That's what Carol cites over and over again, that, and the Cambridge Analytica website was bragging that they were working on the campaign. So it's fair enough to think that it was this kind of petri dish. In the Great Hack, Carol Codwadler goes on about how, she spoke to this guy, Andy Whitmore, an associate of Farage's, and they were there together at the inauguration. And he said to her informally at that Brexit was a petri dish for Trump. And Farage at the inauguration is taped saying that the Brexit campaign started what the Trump campaign has finished. So Carol says, look, yes, it's important to look at this commissioner's report about Cambridge Analytica. She's making points about what Cambridge Analytica and this kind of targeted surveillance, targeted psycho kind of analytical psychometric stuff does to our democracies, and that's important. But she did constantly fuse Cambridge Analytica with the Brexit campaign. So her point is, it's still relevant, and that the ICO isn't the FBI. It isn't actually, the Information Commissioner doesn't have the forensic computer technical ability. So let's keep the data so we can look at it and know in the future.
Okay.
So Cambridge Analytica is an important part of why Trump was elected. It wasn't necessarily an important part of why Brexit happened. However, similar tactics were used, just not by that particular company. And the spectacle of Cambridge Analytica being raided and all that, it was fused. So it's important that that's what the Information Commissioner report has done.
Now, I haven't read much about this story. I've read a little bit. My understanding is that they said, now this might have been only in the context of Brexit for all I know, but my understanding is they said that Cambridge Analytica essentially had no data that you couldn't just buy.
Yes.
It was like that. We were led to believe they had developed new, tricky, sneaky techniques that were divorcing people from their data, and it was this dark edge. But in reality, that data was available to anyone with money.
You can buy it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. But that's good to know.
They also
because that wasn't
oversold
what
all
was
the
sold
time.
at the time.
This Nix man, it was always spruiking up and overselling, because that's what he was in the business of.
Yeah.
And they went into even the Trump campaigns saying that they had 4,000 to 5,000 data points on every US voter. Well, they didn't actually have that, but they had a lot of information that they had, nefariously gathered, partly at the, technical genius of Chris Wiley, who has played a role in trying to shine a light on this. And, you can't find, it's almost difficult to absorb all of the different accounts from former Facebook employees, board members and investors who are coming out and trying to, raise the flag of what a disaster Facebook is and how scary it is, and if you look at this film, The Social Dilemma, it has some problems, but it's a lot of these folks from various companies are explaining how scary what they're doing to our brains, our democracy, our lives, what the algorithms. It's not necessarily, and that's what's important. It's the algorithms. It's not people trying to be evil. It's the Facebook algorithm that suggests more extremist content to QAnon folks, and it's the way that YouTube, the guy who made the YouTube suggestion mechanism, it's that it drives you deeper and deeper into more of the same, and it's that needs to change. It's impossible to look at the QAnon conspiracy without noticing the role that technology is playing on really human emotional vulnerabilities. So it's not all about the tech firms, but it's certainly they can do a lot more than they're doing to worry about how they're corroding and eroding our ability to think.
Okay, two things. First of all, is The Social Dilemma available on YouTube?
Netflix.
Okay. Well, that's not that. We can't put in homework because you have to pay for it. That's okay. And but those who have Netflix, Social Dilemma. Secondly, you've brought up QAnon. Keep on going.
All right. QAnon. Look, QAnon, it has arrived in Australia. Ariel Bogle did a very good piece on the ABC website about analysing how this strange conspiracy theory has come to Australia and has reached us here. And it seems at first like this laughable weirdness. It's about JFK, it's about UFOs, it's about 9/11, it's about Pizzagate, it's about the fact that a bunch of pedophiles are running the state.
Pedophile cannibals.
pedophile cannibals.
Yes.
So it might seem
Vampiric.
yeah.
Pedophile cannibals.
How are we to understand this phenomenon? Well, look, I mean, a lot of people say it's such a diversion. A lot of really good, thoughtful people are being hijacked. People who feel something's wrong, something really is wrong. People who feel that the government aren't telling them the truth, the government aren't telling us the truth. People who feel that, that we're being misled, we are being misled. So they're onto something, but they're being taken down various kind of what's useful to know is that
It's quite a detour they've been taken down.
huge. And the guy who created 8chan, Frederick Brendon is his name. He's recently come out in a podcast that's really worth listening to.
Can you give that to
called
me?
Reply All, and it's episode 166 of Reply All. And this is really groundbreaking because he has stated who the source of QAnon is. Because what QAnon is doing is leaving breadcrumbs. It's kind of gamifying this kind of desperate need to regain control, to understand what's happening, to find meaning, right? So that's what it's kind of playing on. Because he's a sysadmin, like Snowden was, like Julian is, these systems administrators, they have an eagle eye on a platform. As 8chan was being used as the way of leaving the breadcrumbs, the clues for people to follow, to understand QAnon. He knows the identity of who has been like churning out this weirdness, because the Q is someone who has a certain kind of intelligence clearance. So what the people who are following this believe is that they are being told by someone who's deep within the intelligence community what's really happening, and they believe, and they say often, everything's going to be fine. Trust the plan. Julian will be looked after. Trump's going to look after him. So like that's obviously not true. The Trump administration is prosecuting him. So like there's some strange stuff.
Is it the same person the whole time? Or has it changed? Because I remember reading something a few years back saying that originally there were a bunch of guys that were doing it.
Yep.
And after a while they said, this is getting a bit out of hand.
So-
and they stopped, but then another dude took over.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the password, so that's all just explored in this Reply All episode. The password was so easy to crack, and it was something like Maverick or, Marvel or something crazy like that. It was so basic and silly. So it was very easy to crack that password. But because Frederick was the sysadmin of 8chan and has now recanted that and explains Gamergate, it's very interesting to hear him reflect on the power and the negative power of 8chan and how 8chan has caused like actual violence in the world. He's very worried about the power that QAnon's having on distorting thinking. We all want a platform that will curate a lot of shit out and doesn't confirm our bias and doesn't get us addicted to scrolling. But it's not 8chan, and the technology probably can't solve the problem of the QAnons. We probably have to look at the QAnon phenomena as a little bit like a cult, and you don't tell someone they're evil because they're in a cult, and you don't tell the people who are in the cult that the cult's evil. You value them outside the cult, and you ask them questions. One of the things that you'll hear when you engage with a QAnon person is do your own research.
And then they love that.
And then they throw a bunch of research at you that's been done for them.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit tricky, and a lot of it can be understood. And I hope that people will listen to Frederick, because he's an interesting person, and he has actual technical forensic insight, and he has familiarity with that platform in a way that
I'll put a link in the blurb.
Yeah, worth looking at. But be alarmed by QAnon and keep in dialogue with the people who might have fallen into its traps. Try not to give up on those folks, because we've been told some crazy things, irrational things that we've been told that they're reasonable, like trickle down economics is going to fix everything. We've been told that like we can bomb for peace. We've been told that things are crazy, but they're not that crazy.
Yeah,
so,
it's a bit of a jump to pedophile, cannibal, vampires.
It is, but it's a community, right? So what people get from this is a sense of community, and that's what we have to deal with here. It's not rational. It's about people being afraid and trying to get a sense of control back.
I was just about to say that to me, I'm no psychologist, I'm no specialist on cults, but I feel like so much of life can be, and so much of the bad things of life can be explained by people feeling helpless. Yeah. And people wanting to feel like they matter in some way.
Right.
Because the entire world is about grinding you down to make you feel like you don't matter in any way.
Right.
And and I feel like these kinds of organizations, it's not an organization, these kinds of groups, they make you feel like you're special.
Yeah, and you're part of something
Yeah.
bigger, and that there is this crazy difference between the knowing and the unknowing community, and there is. But that we could do something more about that if we were politically engaged.
I'm so conscious of the time, but I just want to say something. When you talked about the rhetoric of QAnon, it reminds me of saying I wasn't going to do this today. I was going to do this on Friday, but it's just relevant to what you're talking about, which is, so I'll try and keep this short, which is that Mitt Romney tweeted out something today, which he's copying a lot of crap for. But I have to say, I reckon it's spot on. I'm going to read the lot. This is, okay. I've stayed quiet, as Mitt Romney. I've stayed quiet with the approach of the election, but I'm troubled by our politics as it has moved away from spirited debate to a vile, vituperative, hate-filled morass that is unbecoming of any free nation, let alone the birthplace of modern democracy. The president calls the Democratic vice presidential candidate a monster. He repeatedly labels the Speaker of the House crazy. He calls for the Justice Department to put the prior president in jail. He attacks the governor of Michigan on the very day a plot is discovered to kidnap her. Democrats launch blistering attacks of their own, though their presidential nominee refuses to stoop as low as others. Pelosi tears up the president's State of the Union speech on national television. Keith Olbermann calls the president a terrorist. Media on the left and right amplify all of it. The rabid attacks kindle the conspiracy mongers and the haters who take the small and predictable step from intemperate word to dangerous action. The world is watching America with abject horror. More consequentially, our children are watching. Many Americans are frightened for our country. So divided, so angry, so mean, so violent. It is time to lower the heat. Leaders must tone it down. Leaders from the top and leaders of all stripes. Parents, bosses, reporters, columnists, professors, union chiefs, everyone. The consequence of the crescendo of anger leads to a very bad place. No sane person can want that. Mitt Romney. Now, he's copping huge amounts of crap for that. And they're saying, number one, they're going, oh, false equivalence, because you mention all these awful things Trump's done, and then you go back to February to say someone tore up a speech. Democrats aren't nearly as bad as the Republicans. What are you saying? Another response is people saying, oh yeah, and what did you do about it? You took Donald Trump's endorsement back in 2012. You tried to get a cabinet position with him. You had dinner with him. What have you done to stop it? Yeah, etc. And then and look, Mitt Romney's not saying he's a perfect human being. It's like, all of us have the eye for an eye problem. Okay, all of us are half blind. Like it's the best you can do to just be self-aware, which at least Mitt Romney is. And
because we're leading towards, like, there is serious violence happening in America right now. Yeah, very, very serious violence. Yeah, and it's the potential is. I mean, I lived there for 10 years, and travelled to 36 states, and there's a lot of guns there. There's a lot of guns there, and there's a lot of anger there, and there's a lot of poverty and desperation there. And like the potential is, if this outrage, which is again something that Facebook, that is its business model, is outrage. It keeps people, whatever keeps you scrolling more. There's an armies of algorithm makers and people working out how to keep you more outraged, because that's the attention economy that is fed by that. I like that he's trying to break that, and to try and crack through and say, "Whoa, this is really pull back. There's consequences here." And let's hope that can be wound back, because I'm very nervous about what's going to happen. I'm scared for my people. I know a lot of people there. I've got a lot of family there, and it is, as Philip Adams says, a failing and failed state in all kinds of ways for many, many people, and it could go very, very wrong. Yeah, and I was just going to say, look, no one disagrees that Trump is very bad, okay? All right? Even Republicans agree that his rhetoric is very bad, okay? No one disagrees with that. But we just need to stop all the point scoring and just put the scoreboard away, all right? And just the fact is, no amping up is, it doesn't matter whether Mitt Romney lists 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats or when they're from. The general point. He's making a point. Yeah, the general point is correct. Yeah. That even when it's accurate. Okay, now Trump does a lot of vituperative, that's a good word, bullshit, which is inaccurate. But even when it's accurate, if you use loose language, it doesn't help. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Democrats love, I'm just going to give a left-wing example, because they want a left-wing example. Democrats love to talk about people dying. Like when they're talking about healthcare, when they're talking about whatever, immigration, when they're talking about whatever the issue. But not when they're funding horrendous defence budgets and waging a lot of wars. I'm not talking hypocrisy here. No. I'm not talking hypocrisy. What I'm saying is that, yes, people will die. That's accurate. Yeah. If you take away people's healthcare, they will die.
I'm not saying they won't. What I'm saying is if you constantly lead with the most bloodthirsty rhetoric that you possibly can to get your way, and we're seeing it right now with the Supreme Court when they're talking about healthcare and all the rest of it. Like, I'm not saying they're lying. They're not. They're telling the truth. But when you're going out of your way to try and be emotional, I understand that's part of politics. Trying to win a vote.
That's what's become.
I get that.
Normal.
But I'm just saying that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, if that's part of the discourse and the discourse continually gets ramped up, then I don't care who's out ahead. I don't care. Like people will catch up eventually. And the problem is that it just makes crazy people crazier. Yep. It makes sane people pissed off.
And it makes Murdoch more money, and it makes Zuckerberg more money.
That's true.
And if it only for that reason, let's scale it down. The other thing is often said, Chaz, is that this podcast is too long. People are very happy, like they're very free to turn it off when they want to.
That's true.
I love that there's not form before content on this podcast. That's what I really like about it. So there's a lot of people who aren't making the comment to tell those people to just switch off when you want to. Yeah. But also, sometimes content is more important than form. So if you want a 12-minute podcast, go for that. Thank you for having me on today.
Well, thank you very much. The main reason I worry about time is not just because of people in the comments, but also because
you have to edit it.
I have to edit the show. The hand of God is currently editing the show by himself, and I need to help him out. But yeah, thank you so much, Flick.
My pleasure.
Now, where do people find you? Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Not Facebook. You don't do Facebook.
Yeah, no, I'm Flick Rubicon on Twitter, and my website for my thesis research is felicityruby.com.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, and I will put up the link from you about where people can get that stuff about Assange. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much, all. That was another PEP. We'll be back on Friday in 2 days' time. We can do it all again. Dr. Dave. Thanks a lot. See you guys.